Recently, Games Workshop have confirmed the old theory that the Emperor of Mankind used warp entities to create the Primarchs. And many Warhammer 40k lore tubers and voices online have come up with tons of ideas about just what beings the Emperor used to craft the souls of the Gene Fathers of the Legions, his demigod sons, including myself. But today, a new perspective dawned on me, and the magnitude of it made my mind do backflips. And I'm scripting this video as a direct result of those revelations. It occurred to me that while everyone is right that the Emperor used warp gods, old entities that have never been associated with chaos but had waned in power over the millennia, archetypes from the deepest depths of human collective consciousness, everyone is still missing one thing. It is a misconception that each Primarch represents a singular, unique, one-off entity, that each Primarch's soul is one warp being, and this is something that the community is taking for granted. But my theory dismantles this idea and reassembles it as a golem composed of various pieces. In this video, I will be presenting what I call the Frankenstein theory of Primarch creation. So it goes like this. I theorize that the Primarchs are stitched together, each a Frankenstein's monster. Not their bodies, as those are perfection and were made using the Emperor's DNA, but their souls. The Primarchs have many aspects of many beings, it would seem, and I'm saying that the warp gods he stole, captured, or bargained with to create his sons were then essentially chopped up and stitched back together just like Dr. Frankenstein did with body parts. The Emperor just did that with waning, fading gods and archetypal entities from the depths of the human subconscious. Funny enough, Mary Shelley also called her novel The Modern Prometheus as well as Frankenstein. And so we should start there, looking at one of the best characters in Warhammer, the Promethean himself, Vulcan, the Lord of Drakes. Vulcan is an obvious amalgamation of multiple entities when we look at him. He's very much the forge god Vulcan, as the Romans called him, Hephaestus to the Greeks. There's a ton of evidence out there, but beyond just the name, that this guy is indeed the Vulcan. But he's also Prometheus. His cult is even called the Promethean cult, and he's called the Promethean. That is because he is composed of Prometheus as well. He's not fully either one of them and was made of parts of each soul, in my opinion, because the Emperor put elements of those entities into other Primarchs as well. But Vulcan seems to have received the bulk of the Forge God and God of Volcanoes. But we could argue that whatever pieces the Emperor did not end up using were put into Ferrus Manus and others. Vulcan is neither fully the Roman Vulcan nor the Titan Prometheus, but his own monstrosity, combined from the parts of both of them, and possibly more entities as well. And eventually Vulcan does come to realize that he is indeed a monster, just as Frankenstein's monster did. Prometheus, like our 18th Primarch, was a perpetual, cursed by Zeus, the king of the Olympian gods, to rejuvenate every day, and punished by being chained to a rock and having a vulture, if I recall correctly, pick his liver out and eat it day after day. Prometheus could never die and was endlessly tortured. Why? For giving the secret of fire to man. Many think this is a metaphor for the knowledge of the gods in general, but yeah, Zeus forbade giving the secret of fire to man, as it was for the gods only, and Prometheus defied him. Thus was cruelly punished. All those tropes fit right into the Promethean, Vulcan, the Lord of Drakes. His perpetual nature is something his father crafted into him when he was made. And the Emperor got that from Prometheus himself. We can't deny that Vulcan is literally Vulcan, Hephaestus. But he's also Prometheus. Moving on from Vulcan, I have to say that I don't believe that any of the Primarchs, not a single one, is a singular soul. I believe that they are all like Vulcan, or even beyond that, a patchwork quilt of soul parts all stitched together, never able to go back to what they once were, and now forced together into what would essentially be abominations. The Primarchs are monsters. Many of them come to that very conclusion, and they have that keyword in their data sheets, monster, in the tabletop game. Not just the demons, even Gilliman and the Lion have the keyword. While Layman Russ realizes he's a monster, when he sees the true nature of what the Primarchs are, we get a clue to this Frankenstein's monster nature of the Primarchs. Stabbed by the false Russ with the Dionysian spear, the spear of the Emperor in Wolfsbane, one of Lehman's hearts is exploded and the spear protruding from his back. He's like Odin, crucified on his own tree of knowledge, making the ultimate sacrifice to learn the deepest of inner truths. And Russ is horrified when he learns what he is and what his brothers are. He knows he isn't of chaos, but he is of the warp. Almost all the Primarchs make mention of that throughout the Horus Heresy series, and seem to have varying degrees of awareness of their nature. But to Russ it was laid bare, and it totally disturbed him. What he is, how he was made, and what he's made of, it all terrified him. It doesn't diminish his loyalty, but he is very, very bothered by it. What could shake a Primarch to his core like that? With Russ, we see aspects of multiple of the Norse and Slavic gods combined. Even just glancing at him on the surface, we can see aspects of Odin for sure. But he's also got Thor, Balder, and Tyr in him, and that's just the Norse pantheon. So just like Vulcan, Layman Russ is no singular being either. He's got aspects of many of the archetypal beings from humanity's deep past. Russ seems to be composed of many more beings than Vulcan is, on the surface at least. One thing we know about all the Primarchs is the process for creating them was unique. It cannot be replicated, not by the Chaos Gods or not even by the Emperor himself. He can't just make another Angron, for example, to replace the broken one. It seems that some Primarchs were made with the most choice aspects of the souls the Emperor used. The tastiest morsels, the strongest characteristics, the real grade A choice cuts of meat, to stick with the Frankenstein metaphor. But others, they may have just been made with the scrapple that remained, the leftovers. I find it interesting that Horus Lupercal and Sanguinius both share aspects of Lucifer. That Conrad Kurz and Corvus Corax have so many overlapping traits. That the Lion seems to be on a total King Arthur trip, but he's also the Green Knight. That Dorn and Perturabo are way more alike than either of them would ever admit. There are clues that these super beings are indeed amalgamations, conglomerates. Piece together parts that make a new, different whole that is a far cry from anything any of the constituents could ever claim to be. Just like Frankenstein's monster. The Emperor's creation of the Primarchs was so disturbing that it even bothered the Custodes that knew about it to their core, as noted by Diocletian in Carrion Lord of the Imperium. This started the Custodes off on a bad note right off the bat with the Primarchs. There was no love there, as many of the Emperor's companions knew the Primarchs were monsters, and they had even counseled the Emperor not to go through with making his generals, that he lied to and called sons. It isn't easy to look beyond their bodies, crafted to beyond perfection with the Emperor's own genetics. It isn't easy to look past some of their abilities either. But when we look at the basic natures of the Primarchs, the things they're into, what they vibe on, how they approach everything, that's where we see deeper into their natures, and see that they are indeed conglomerations of multiple deep-rooted human archetypes. Now, it cannot be overstated that the beings that the Emperor used, or their warp essences rather, their souls, may have been a lot different from how we understand those beings today. Gods change in human perception over time, and we're dealing with many millennia. For example, the Black Angel and the Gold Angel of Baal that make up the soul of Sanguinius, those were gods of the people of Baal that came with them, transformed into those beings by the millennia of Baalite culture. I've theorized in other videos that they represent Lucifer and Dracula, or their roots are there, far back in the annals of history at the dawn of time to those in the 31st millennium. Gods that people worshipped on Earth thousands of years ago have taken on many new names, characteristics, and even been totally retconned by later cultures. It's still happening today. And many were combined, especially Canaanite gods, to create Satan or Lucifer, for example. And this is only over a relatively few thousand years. For those in the Great Crusade era, it is 30,000 years into the future, isolated on a hostile, difficult planet there. So, any archetypes from the human subconscious they brought with them initially would take on new aspects over time. Thus, something that started in the Middle East in the Bronze Age here on Terra might be totally different and called something different on Baal or any other world of the Imperium 30,000 years later. Perhaps the beings the Emperor used were not exactly as we understand them now, though they are obviously the evolved states of gods and entities that were rooted so deeply in human consciousness, some may even predate human speech. Lorgar and Corvus both feel like they're more at home in the warp, without the need for the physical constraints of their flesh bodies the Emperor created to house their essences in real space. They both note that they're beings of the warp. They seem to know their nature a bit more than most in the story Shadow of the Past, the one where Warp Demon Corax fights Demon Prince Lorgar, one of the best fights ever in my opinion. But it is obviously two god-tier beings going at it. I think the Emperor made his sons out of the parts of souls of gods that had fallen to the wayside, weakened by no longer being worshipped, lingering in the warp as they were because they could more easily be controlled. Imagine how headstrong a being like Thor would be if you didn't chop it to pieces, throw it into a blender, combine it with more tempered aspects of other gods, and baked at 350 for 45 minutes. If Russ was simply Odin in a new flesh body, as many believe, he'd be way too headstrong to be controlled or even reasoned with, as an example. So the Emperor, as usual, was trying to have his cake and eat it too. This is all why the Primarchs cannot truly be replicated. They can be cloned, but their souls cannot be remade. It makes sense in a truly grimdark way why Russ would be so horrified. He's a son of the Emperor, but he's so much more. He got to be the one to look in the mirror and see the true horror of his basic nature and that of his brothers. But this all leads me to wonder, if the Emperor truly did this, and I obviously think he did, were the Primarchs who went traitor composed of the leftover parts? The scraps. I get asked all the time to do more videos where I talk about my crazy theories, as just straight up lore can get stale and opinion pieces are always divisive. And these fun conspiracy theories are always great videos to do, and usually go over well as they drive discussion. But the problem is that the ideas don't come from thinking about Warhammer. They always just pop into my head at random moments, sometimes very inopportune ones. There's no consistency to it. The Emperor reveals his light and his truth as he sees fit, and does not often shine his light on me, but when he does, wow. Now, if the Primarchs are all monsters and all created from parts of various gods as I've suggested, then that makes the Emperor the ultimate Dr. Frankenstein in the setting. It isn't Belisarius Cawl, and it isn't Fabulous Bill either. But the Emperor is the big bad when it comes to horrifying, warp-infused genetic experimentation. There's a lot to wonder about as to his motivations, but I do want to double down on the whole easier to control aspect. But he also wanted, ostensibly, to create things that were greater than the sum of their parts. Prometheus cannot ever die and always regenerates, and he had extreme compassion for humans, but he didn't have any real aspects for war. Big E used him to get that perpetual quality for Vulcan, but then he needed someone that was a warrior too, and so took aspects from beings like Ares and or Mars, as well as the forge god Vulcan, and we can see that indeed it was a synergetic alchemy that he came up with. The whole is definitely greater than the sum of its parts with the Lord of Drakes. But there are Primarchs where I have to wonder what the Emperor was thinking when he came up with them, almost as if they were, just completely composed of leftovers. Not the best bits of the souls of the gods used, but whatever remained. And the Emperor was not one to waste resources. So I think this is how he came up with ones that are sort of lesser echoes of others. Like how Ferrus Manus has some of that forge god Hephaestus, so Vulcan didn't get it all, but he for sure got the best parts. And I'd say that both Ferrus and Angron have some aspects of Heracles or Hercules, but Ferrus certainly has the lion's share of that god's essence. It was more of an occult horror, a Lovecraftian cosmic horror even, than an exact scientific process that created the Primarchs, it would certainly seem. Why would a being as deeply motivated, as dark and secretive, and as incomprehensibly capable as the Emperor not try to pull off something so complicated? I think it is very telling that the Custodes advised against the creation of the Primarchs, and they counseled that they were quite capable of being the generals of mankind's armies. Only the Emperor really, when it came down to it, was fully on board with the Primarch project, and only the Emperor saw his vision for them. But everyone around him knew it was a huge risk, a gamble that none of them were really willing to take. And they of course were right. The Primarch project may have just backfired right in the Emperor's face. Now, if it turns out that they ever dive deep into the creation of the demigod sons of the Emperor, the generals of the legions, and I am wrong about all this, well, that's fine with me. But if I am wrong, we must consider what other terrible horror did Layman Russ see when he was impaled by the Dionysian spear, which reveals the inner truth of anyone wounded by it. What horror did he face when he looked in the mirror? I think all the clues are there when it comes down to it, and I think we could look at any of the Primarchs and attribute multiple entities' aspects to them, and still see crossover with the other Primarchs. They are all cut from the same cloth in many ways, as absolutely different as they all are. Anyway, those are my thoughts on how the Emperor created the Primarchs. He truly was the mad scientist, experimenting with things that perhaps he should not have, and each of his sons, loyalist and traitor alike, are truly monsters. But we must, no matter what, admit that the true artistry of the creation of the Primarchs was in the warp infusion much more than the flesh the Emperor crafted.